Hey, Plankton, can our first song go like this?
I take money from the rich and invest it in the poor.
And then turn into one of those songs that goes...
Are you poor? Of course you are. You're pathetic. Only the top 1% has all the money. Everyone knows that. And like an OnlyFans subscription, only the wealthiest get the true rewards. The rich get richer, while you get poorer. They live in mansions, crash the economy, take your lunch money, and you say thank you. The world's out to get you. Corruption is all over. What are you prepared to do about it? Well, probably just spam W based in a Twitch chat or make an extremely pretentious TikTok. But there was a time where we actually did do something about it, where people stood up to the 1%, made the rich sweat, and started an economic revolution, which of course failed miserably, so snap on them TikToks, buddy. But first we have to start at the start of the Great Recession. It's 2007 and the markets are awesome. Buy a house, a new car, who cares if you don't have credit? The economy's just gonna keep going up and up forever and ever and...
Oh my goodness!
The Great Recession threw the US economy into a blender, but I already talked about that, so I'm gonna skip over all the important context. In this desperate hour, a man came along promising to fix the failures of the government and the economy. A man who promised, above all else, change. And when Obama was voted into office in 2008, it seemed like change was really possible. But soon the weeks became months, the months became years, and people didn't seem to notice a lot of change. At least in their wallets, no pun intended. Now, Obama had a massive task of fixing the largest economy on Earth in his first term. He bailed out banks, passed regulations, and provided stimulus packages. But to some, it seemed like the government was only out to help big banks, not the ones they'd screwed over. Why did they have to sit around poor and jobless while the people who supposedly did this got a lollipop and a slap on the ass? Yes, the recession technically ended in 2009, but by 2011, employment was still down, and average household income was at its lowest point in over a decade. People realized that despite all their hope, the world still sucked. And a few people decided it was high time they did something about it. Now, this feeling of, wow, everything's terrible all the time, wasn't just in America. 2011 was the year of the protester. The Arab Spring was in full swing, along with protests in Greece, Portugal, Spain, Iceland, and more, partially due to financial issues. Inspired by these defiant demonstrators, a man named Kali Lawson decided it was time for America to get down and dirty with some demonstrations. He was the co-founder of Adbusters, an anti-consumerism magazine, and along with one of his co-workers, posted on their blog a call to action. They proposed a peaceful occupation of Wall Street to protest corporate influence in America. They'd march in, set up camps, and stay for months to get their message across. And they'd start on September 17th, the day the Constitution was signed. And also because it was his mom's birthday. Wall Street, of course, is the famous location of the New York Stock Exchange. It's the home of finance in America, and where peak too early frat kids go when they have nothing left to lose because they saw Wolf of Wall Street once. It was the perfect place for this kind of protest, and the internet was all in. Quickly, the message spread through Tumblr, Reddit, Twitter, and every other cesspool of the internet, famously using the hashtag Occupy Wall Street. Can't have your 2010 social movement without a hashtag. On September 17th, around 1,000 protesters showed up on the streets of New York. They planned to camp at the Charging Bull, the symbol of Wall Street that reminds investors how bullshit their business degree was. Yet the police had known about the protest and had already set up barricades. But this would backfire horribly for the NYPD, as they would instead make camp at Zuccotti Park. Zuccotti was a large park that featured power outlets every 15 feet, meaning that setting up base and staying there was extremely easy. Not only that, but it was privately owned, meaning the police couldn't go in there to clear it out unless the owners requested it. Another win for preventative police action. Quickly, the protesters began to set up camp, pitching tents, charging laptops, and writing signs. And there they would stay for the next 2 months, gathering more and more protesters as time went on. Both parties were outraged by the big bank bailouts, making the movement sound good to everyone. They rallied against the top 1%, who they believed controlled controlled the country. What a ridiculous notion. We are the 99% became the rallying cry of the movement, and they were gonna make sure that Wall Street heard it. Like the Arab Spring, Occupy depended on social media to communicate and organize. Facebook pages and blogs were set up, hashtags spread on Twitter, videos made on YouTube. Things were coordinated through social media from makeshift tech bases they had set up in the park. But after 3 days of this hippie commune shouting loudly in the middle of their city, the police got pretty sick of it. They began to get more aggressive and a bit more ridiculous as they arrested protesters under an 1845 law that prevented masked people from gathering for anything but a masquerade party. Personally, I think they should arrest people at masquerades too. I mean, it's the most evil type of party. Second most. A few days later, police would arrest 80 protesters and pepper spray crowds. Videos of police spraying multiple unarmed women went viral, leading to a surge of support for the protesters. Another win for preventative police action. People began to flock to the protest and read about it online. America was finally beginning to notice, and the first of many similar Occupy protests was held in Chicago. Soon, celebrities began giving endorsements, even speeches to the protesters, and local unions pledged their support. There was rumors that Radiohead was going to give a free concert to the protesters. And since the protesters were mainly young, white, college-educated adults with no jobs, they loved Radiohead. But turns out it was a hoax and hundreds of fans showed up in the street for nothing. Just another one of this society's cruel tricks. But this really seemed to piss them off, as the next day, thousands of them began to march across the Brooklyn Bridge. There, police again clashed with protesters, luring them into places where they could be arrested and nabbing around 700 of them. Yet this only led to more mass media attention and support for the movement. Welcome to Zuccotti Park. We got everything our new reformed democratic society could ever need. We got Wi-Fi for all, luxurious sleeping spaces, even laundry machines. I have no idea how we got those here. Over there's the library, so you can read up on all our revolutionary ideas. Or just Harry Potter. We are millennials after all. We get free meals donated all the time. Tonight's dessert is Ben & Jerry's, because of course they're involved in this. Always stay up to date with our very own Occupy newspaper. Listen to all the rants and raves at our open forum, where we let anyone speak, and I'm talking anyone. Sure, it smells like the tail end of Bernie Sanders' jockstrap, and in New York, that's really saying something, but it's the heart of the movement. And if you don't like it, don't worry, because now there's plenty to choose from all over the country. The protests were spreading. Occupy movements were popping up in almost every major city, attracting thousands of participants. There was Occupy LA, Occupy DC, Occupy Memphis, I guess. Eventually, they even spread internationally. Obama gave his sorta support for the protests, saying he understood their frustrations, even though they were partially aimed at him. But the movement had moved past the need for Obama. It was ordinary people that gave the movement momentum, and it seemed the revolution that they had wanted might be right on the horizon. Finally, after weeks of protesting, shouting, boycotting, and blogging, people around the country were beginning to listen. And yet, they didn't really know what the protesters were even protesting for specifically. And that was kind of the problem. You may have noticed I wasn't very specific with what the actual goal of the protest was. And that's because I don't know. Because nobody did. What was the actual point of the protests? Were they for something or against something? What did they want changed specifically? You see, the Occupy movement prided itself on being decentralized, meaning it had no leaders. Sure, Adbusters set it in motion, but they refused to take any credit. This was meant to display their democratic beliefs that revolved entirely around the will of the people. They were simply the voice of the 99%. And yeah, sure, that sounds great and all, free love or whatever, but no leader means no clear message or plan of action. Everyone basically wanted the same things: an end to corporate influence, a better economy, more jobs, so on and so forth. But like, how? Ending the influence of money on democracy is not only a massive task, but an extremely vague one. What steps specifically did they want to be taken? Anyone could say, I want to fix things, but if you don't have a plan to fix things, then you're probably not gonna fix things. things. There were some ideas for actual steps to take, but without a leader to lay out the demands, it was mostly just noise. Not to mention, the protest had so many people involved, there were like 1 million messages. Some people wanted to solve income inequality. Others wanted to stop spending on foreign wars. Some people wanted to fight the corporate media. Others wanted to stop jobs from going overseas. Speeches often ranged from well-educated specific talks to dumb, probably drug-fueled ramblings. And Zuccotti was certainly no utopia. Reportedly attracting drug users and rumors of assaults forced women to set up their own private sleeping quarters. As the protest went on, adbusters suggested that maybe it was best they quit while they were ahead, to leave the park triumphant that they had brought these issues to the light. But it really was out of their hands, and the protesters weren't done yet. Clashes with police were becoming more common, with barricades overrun, batons swung, and mace sprayed. Protests had grown to the tens of thousands, and eventually the owners of Zuccotti Park got sick of it. On October 13th, Brookfield, the company that owned the park, announced that the protesters had to leave the next day so that the park could be cleaned. Why, you may ask? Didn't they kick them out in the first place? Well, supposedly Obama was paying them, but they were over it. Yet the outraged protesters stayed. Instead, they took it upon themselves to clean up the park and vowed to defend it from police. And the next day, Brookfield backed down. Protesters blamed the whole plot on New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg, who had been real wishy-washy on whether or not he supported the protest. At first, he accused protesters of taking the jobs away somehow, and that it was bad for tourism, because people just loved a vacation on Wall Street, I guess. Yet a few days later, he said the protesters could stay as long as they wanted. Still, it was pretty clear he wanted them gone, but he'd have to bide his time. On October 15th, the protesters announced a global day of rage with over 900 demonstrations worldwide. Though generally non-violent, riots broke out in Rome. Days later in Oakland, mass arrest led to police firing tear gas canisters into crowds. This would lead to a general strike across the city, closing businesses and the busy port. Another win for... On November 5th, major banks across the country were marched on to encourage people to pull their money from corporate banks and put it into local credit unions. And it's estimated that around 600,000 people pulled their money. A Time survey found that more than half of Americans viewed Occupy favorably. And how couldn't they, with exciting events like bullfighting on display? Back at the bull statue, 2 rodeo clowns hopped police barricades and began to climb on and spank the bull. Police quickly tackled them, but ironically were so distracted by these literal rodeo clowns that they didn't notice the matador hop up on one of their cars and wave his sash at the charging bull. A symbolic act of defiance that was met with cheers in Zuccotti Park. The change they wanted seemed right around the corner. But after nearly 2 months, Mayor Bloomberg decided it was time for it to end. On November 15th, Brookfield issued another eviction notice to the protesters. Officers showed this to protesters at 1 a.m. and with orders from Bloomberg, moved in with riot police to clear the camp. Those who refused to leave were arrested, and reporters were prevented from getting too close. Cops ransacked the camp like a Mongol horde, trashing everything they found. Books, tents, clothes, computers, everything. Bloomberg promised that Occupy could return to the park once it was clean, but without tents. They could protest, but there could be no camp. In response to the loss of their home, Occupy marched on the stock exchange, with hundreds of similar protests across the country. Hundreds were arrested, but it was no use. Without the park, the already decentralized movement broke apart further. All attempts at retaking the park failed. There would continue to be some demonstrations afterwards, with remnants of the movement continuing the fight for the next few months. But like your parents, there was no returning to the good old days, and they eventually broke apart. Occupy was essentially over. Let's not beat around the bush here. Occupy Wall Street failed. It didn't cause any changes in banking or legislation, didn't stop politics from being run by money, and didn't end the reign of the 1%. In fact, the gap between rich and poor in the US right now is higher than ever. Many protesters saw it as a waste, but it did have its impacts. Occupy helped inspire the fight for increased minimum wage, along with Black Lives Matter and other social movements. It propelled the careers of leftist politicians like Bernie Sanders, and some credit the rise of populist politicians like Trump with the distrust of typical elites created during Occupy. Despite its failures, Occupy brought questions of class class struggle and economic fairness to the forefront, things that were once thought to be too commie to even mention. So don't worry, the messages of the movement have never really left social media, so I'm sure with so much discussion online about these topics, our economic conditions will only get better. Now go get a job, you lazy piece of shit.